This is going to be a video that I've prepared in my mind for maybe 10 or 15 years now, and it's on the topic of raw evil and the darker side of human nature and the struggle that I've had and that I think any human being with any degree of self-awareness is going to have as far as seeing people as good and seeing the beauty in humanity and even the beauty in ourselves despite the darker aspects of human nature. Now, we're sitting here in a Holocaust memorial in Miami. This video is intended to be very, very respectful, and if I deviate from that respectability, I want to apologize clearly in advance. But the reason why this inspired this video for me is because I think about events like the Holocaust almost every day when I think about how human beings, we have to rise above that kind of horrible, divisive behavior. Now, the quote that we see here from Anne Frank, I'm going to paraphrase it here, but I'm going to write it on the video itself. In spite of it all, I still really believe that human beings are good at heart. So in this video here today, what we're going to cover are some of the darker sides of human nature, which can cause us to do horrible things. Or if you actually look at the degree of human-to-human killings last century, it's in the hundreds of millions, is my understanding, or over 100 million. It's something really crazy to think about. And what we want to do is look at those aspects, pick them apart a little bit, and find a way to reconcile that, at least, from two guys on a video, right? Our best attempt to reconcile that and really ask you the question, how will you be able to reconcile that and sort of rise above it and love your fellow human beings, bring people together, break down division, and create a beautiful environment where people do love each other and move in a positive direction. I think that when you do that, it really opens up a lot of realism to you in life, and it also allows you to accomplish more and live deeper and with more passion and with more love for your fellow man. So in this video, this is going to be a very difficult video, but what we're going to do is break down even just some common petty stuff and show how we can rise above that to love our fellow human beings.
For each of us when we're kids, everything starts out with a lot of positivity. It starts out with fun. It starts out with excitement, a lot of instant gratification. You really don't necessarily know sometimes when you're living in a world that's less advantaged than another kid. Everything kind of starts out really positive until you start seeing some of the negatives. I think when we're babies, when we start to learn how to crawl and then walk, we're kind of applauded for everything that we do that's positive. So to us, the whole world seems very positive. We really seem like everything's fantastic, everything's great. We don't even really start to get disciplined until we're several years old for the most part. So then when you start to see abuse at the home, when you start to see other siblings being treated differently, maybe you were a stepchild and then you were treated differently than your brother or sister. Oftentimes, I remember when I was a kid, I kind of definitely grew up in a less than perfect home situation. I'd oftentimes kind of see signs of different types of abuse with either my family or friends' families. I would really kind of see that the world isn't as rosy of a world necessarily as I kind of thought it was. However, I was still having fun because I was a child, so all of my issues seemed very small, right? And then as I got older, I kind of started to see issues with teachers. I started to see issues with people just kind of at the grocery store. As we're walking, I would see people snap at each other. I remember this one time I was in my early teenage years. I remember seeing a mom start hitting a kid in kind of a local convenience store. And I would just kind of notice, I was wondering, like, she takes care of this kid. She must love this kid. The kid was a few years younger than me. And I was wondering how what could possess her? What could actually take over her to start abusing this kid? Just physically hitting him in the face over and over again. And it was just this anger, it was this rage that filled inside of her. I mean, they most likely lived together. She most likely put the roof over his head. So why would she feel the need to abuse her own kid like that? And at first I just thought, oh, this terrible person, this terrible mom. I just immediately thought all these negative things about her. And then it kind of, as I progressed through life, I kind of look back on it and I look at that moment. I'm just thinking now, after kind of learning through all of this, I see that she must have had her own demons to battle. She must have had her own internal issues to deal with. It doesn't excuse what she was doing, but I started to kind of, as I've gone through my own journey, I've started to kind of rationalize a bit, or at least understand where sometimes those people are coming from. And again, it doesn't excuse what she was doing, but as I started to see when maybe I would emotionally or verbally abuse somebody accidentally, or I would be a little bit less than positive in a situation, I would take things less than with complete positivity, I would kind of notice where I would kind of fray. And then I kind of realized that kind of deep down in all of us, we have we have the capacity and the ability to go over the edge beyond where necessarily we feel like we can. If we're pushed, if we're put in a corner, if we're kind of just shoved into a corner in such a way where we feel like there's no way out. It can be a bit of a dangerous place, I think, for some people. And I think if you have this generational ability to be put in this corner where you're just you and your family and your friends, if options are taken away from you and you're just shoved into that corner, I think you can take things in a much more negative path. As I started social coaching, I would see different people as they have success and find partners that they cared about, partners that they had dreamed of. I started to see that even the slightest issues added up over time would cause them to really, they would kind of verbally abuse each other, or they would potentially cheat on each other. They'd have they would cause pain amongst each other for various reasons. And it really was fascinating to see how people could really take some of the pent up pain from their childhood and then just kind of dump it onto the people in their life, almost as a way that they just had to get the pain off of them. Mm-hmm. And it's like they almost just had to, evil be gone almost by any means, even if it meant hurting the people that they wanted to hurt the least. And oftentimes you'll notice, whether it's a business partner, whether it's a romantic partner, whether it's one of your closest friends, you'll oftentimes put your pain on that person because they're the closest to you. Then if all of that resentment builds up of kind of pain dumping onto each person, of kind of poison dripping onto the different people in your lives, then it ends up being this nasty spiral, because they then oftentimes will build their own pain bodies really to what you're doing to them, and then it becomes this negative spiral downward, and it will just take you further and further and further down, to the point where almost sometimes relationships can't be built back up again, or to the point where you have these country to country enemies with each other. Then it ends up breeding this all-out war, where in reality, how can you even have a country on country war when, if you think about it, you might not even know the individual people, the individual mother taking her kids to go get bread from the market, or the dad going to get coffee before work. Yet we can just say their whole ideology is not what we agree on. So then then we're much more okay, just really just destroying everything destroying and just disagreeing with everything that they're made of.
Yeah, and this is something like, even for myself, I can remember as a young kid really just watching kids' TV shows like Sesame Street, or I can't even remember the names of the other ones, but like these cute, fun shows, right? And thinking that the world was this beautiful place. And it is a beautiful place, but beginning to realize with things like, say, a World Vision commercial, where you see children starving to death. The point that we're trying to make here is what people do to harm each other and to address it. And I think that's why a monument like this is created, is to make you think. And what I just started thinking about is just seeing the way that people harm each other and that nature that we have. And I would even see that myself in, say, building a business, and watching people who start off so happy and having fun together, flipping back around and messing with each other and stealing from each other and losing that love for each other and attacking each other and viewing each other as the enemy, unable to see the humanity in the other person. Like you said, in social coaching, I mean, you'll see that with couples, the way they treat each other. I mean, you'll see it in divorce, people treating each other like their worst enemy. Somebody who they were completely physically intimate with has now become their worst enemy. And I mean, any human being can think about any ex that they have and think, can you still see them in a positive light and see their humanity? Or are you just enraged with them and holding on to that pain with them? I've also seen this even in low-level celebrity, and the way that people will look to exploit each other, the way that people will look to take advantage of each other, the way that people go into a situation not viewing that person as a human being, but looking to see what they can pull out of them. And then once they've sucked them dry of value, discarding them. Or if not getting what they want, trashing them, or making spectacles and drama. And you even see this in the media, how the media will often create fake stories that they know are fake just to get clickbait, eating off of other people and the destruction of their reputation simply to get a story. There's a human nature aspect about scapegoating people, and we feel this sort of untargeted discontent, and then rather than address that untargeted discontent, we make a decision to scapegoat somebody. And I don't know everything about World War II, but my understanding is that essentially the Jewish people were scapegoated for whatever frustration they had. And I don't fully understand that history, but I've tried to. And I want to learn more about it, so I apologize if I didn't understand that fully, but that's my understanding, is essentially it was just a scapegoating hatchet job. And what is it about human nature that can simply accept that scapegoating? That we call it, it's called triangulation. What does it mean to have triangulation? Basically to blow off negative energy that you have pent up in yourself by triangulating it onto another person. I think everybody's done that. If you're thinking in your own memory right now, surely you've done that, where you're in a bad mood and rather than deal with it, you create this almost like a factory with like this escape, this sort of offshoot of smoke, this smokestack coming up. And that smokestack is essentially triangulating another person, because it's so much easier to scapegoat another human being than it is to honestly say, you know what, maybe I'm just having some frustration. And a lot of the time, it's only when you've really lashed out that negative energy that you're carrying kind of comes off you, because you've thrown it onto them now. You've taken your pain and thrown it onto another person. And once you've done that, you look at it and you say, what have I done? What did I do? And I think everybody would have that experience to a small degree as a kid. Everybody's going to have to confront that, saying, what have I done here? What did I do? Everybody's going to have that. But at a certain point, you've got to snap out of it, and you've got to understand the world needs to learn how to release its pain. And the world needs to understand how to not triangulate people or scapegoat people or become tribal and create the other, but to see that humanity that you have in another person. I think the single most important thing to understand that many people fail to see is the unlikeliness of life and the specialness of life. And understand that most of the universe, from what we can currently tell, is a bunch of rocks and gases. And the only planet that we know that has life is planet Earth. So here on this planet, the rarity, the unlikely odds that this planet would even exist, or that you would even have human beings on it, to make a human, a couple, they mate, they have the kid, have to care for that pregnancy, care for that little baby, grow it up, educate it, feed it. All that work goes into creating something. Unbelievable amounts of work. And that life can be taken like that. That life could be extinguished like that by somebody who's enraged and in pain and doesn't have a value for life. So seeing that that is a part of human nature and understanding that as human nature, that clearly that kind of stuff happens, even seeing certain aspects of it yourself, how do you come to terms to loving human beings? How can you come to terms with the fact that that's part of the species that you belong to? That is something that is a part of what humans have done. And rather than even triangulating and saying, look what they did, where could you see the little areas of that in your psychology as a mirror on yourself and as a teachable moment to learn how to stop creating division but bring people together?
When we started this conversation, I kept referencing babies. I kept referencing that really most of us, really, to be fair, this is kind of the quote that Anne Frank was talking about, is that as a baby, as a child, we're not filled with hate. For the most part, we are filled with love, or at least not this negativity as a child, but it's all these different negative situations that come up. It's all the different negative pendulums shifted up over time in this kind of this exponential effect as we have different people coming and going out of our lives. It's one of those things where the boss ends up being mad at the father. Then the father comes home and yells at the mother. Then the mother comes home and then ends up being rude to the child, and the child ends up being disrespectful to the baby, and then or the child ends up kicking the dog. And then the dog ends up being a mean dog, and then later the dog's walking down the street, and then the dog's barking at them, and they wonder why the dog's barking at them. Well, it's kind of this, you're almost passing the negativity off from yourself to someone else, and it gets charged up with every single person. So instead, if you can have, what are you concerned by? What happens in your life that affects you? Are you at a low level of concern where if somebody honks the horn at you or someone cuts you off, you get all mad and flip them off and you start screaming, you get really upset? Or does it take a lot to bother you? That's kind of how I look at my evolution of this, how badly does somebody have to treat me for me to actually be bothered by it? Well, you still need boundaries at the same time. You can be a much happier, much more fulfilled person if you don't let those things bother you. If instead you decide. Oftentimes you see someone who's honking, someone who's getting very mad, It's very interesting because you're looking at somebody who it doesn't take that much to set them off. It's somebody that it's almost, you almost want to look at them and you feel a little pity, you feel a little bit sad for them that's really what the most important thing is on their mind. That's what's, the RAS I feel like has these different levels to it. Whereas if somebody cuts you off in traffic and that's the biggest thing that's going to happen to you that day, that's going to really set you off, that's what you're concerned by, well then what's going to end up happening is you're going to be somebody who's just perpetually kind of this magnet for these different types of attributes. You're going to keep pushing it into the next thing and the next thing. Instead, be somebody who kind of rises above the fray, not concerned by these small individual little points of negativity, and then what you can do is you can spread that positivity from person to person.
For many years, I would grow up seeing how people treat each other, and I really loved how people can treat each other very well and with respect and go above and beyond for each other. I think about things like the World Trade Center and how there was people running into the building, not just running out of the building, but people that would run into the building to try to save lives. I've seen people who have stepped up and put themselves out there in order to do the right thing. And I think that's one of the most beautiful aspects of human nature. But at the same time, I've also confronted a lot of really bad behavior over the years, and I've struggled to deal with it. And over time, strangely, I was able to actually make some sense of it. And here's how I made sense of it. Part of our psyche as human beings, and really we could talk for hours about this, but I'm going to just cover a little bit here, is something called reticular activation system. I've discussed this in other videos. It's essentially selective focus. And in a strange way, that selective focus that human beings have is in many ways the way that evil can actually justify itself. Because, I mean, even look at this guy honking as he honks at this person, just honking at them. He just wants to get to where he's going. So some guy just feels the need to just crank a horn behind this guy and jam him full of adrenaline and jam him full of cortisol so that he can rationalize. He's got to get to where he's got to go. And in his mind, he believes that that's justified. He's unable to get, he doesn't have enough bandwidth. He's not thriving enough in his life to have the bandwidth to consider how his behavior affects another person. That being the case, what happens, you have something called reticular activation system. What is that? Essentially, there's so much to perceive in life. There's so much around you. Even if you look at this frame, the frame with the shot that's arcing around us right now, there's so much to take in that you're not going to notice everything. The mind is only looking for relevant information. So the mind will actually screen out, it could be something like 90% of what's going on in any situation. It just filters it out and only focuses in on what has value or what's a threat. What that means is that in any incident, if 3 or 4 different people were there, every single person will have a different story. Everybody's story will be different. And it also means that everybody's views might be different. Maybe their spiritual beliefs could be different. Maybe their culture could be different. And the way that this tends to evolve is that the mind, the human mind, is my understanding at least, is looking at the environment and trying to figure out what to do, trying to figure out what beliefs would make the most sense to that environment. And this is why people are going to have different cultures or different beliefs, is because that belief system could be suited to that particular environment to help that human being to survive in that environment that they're in. But where that gets crazy is where you look at somebody who has a different set of beliefs and attack them because you're now identified and make an identity out of your beliefs and view any different belief as a threat to your belief, therefore as a threat to you personally, and that other belief has to be, for some reason, snuffed out because you don't think that you can survive if you don't get rid of that other belief. Now, when you add to that the fact that people contain trauma energy, like you started talking about earlier, from a young age, and that trauma energy is elevating and inevitably find some kind of outlet because we're not taught as human beings how to release, you have reticular activation system that is really looking out for the selfish interests of the biological entity. We're all biological entities. You know, you look at a nature movie, the animal's eating another animal. You look at documentaries about the ocean, every fish is eating every other fish or whatever it is, right? As human beings, we're also biological entities. There's status structures, mating rights based on status, property rights based on status, and perks to higher status, people jockeying for status, people with different beliefs, people with different cultures, people identified with their belief, people containing a lot of negative energy. And what's interesting is that in the same way that life can be so beautiful and go up and up and up, life can get so dark and go down and down and down to where that negative energy can start to fuel and fester on itself. And when there's combat and people are going at each other, they can go lower and lower and lower and lower to where I've seen even some of my best friends on this earth who I've shared beautiful moments with get to the point where they can't see me for who I am and are trying to feed me with energy that even makes me want to react and get so mad that I want to react and have to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to and that's it. I'm just going to stop the pendulum from going back and forth doing nothing. Let them just kind of have the win. This is a part of our nature. The selective focus, the reticular activation system. When somebody who loves you and cares about you is getting a benefit, maybe their RAS overly focuses on the great aspects of you. But when suddenly the situation changes, maybe you've grown apart in some way, maybe there's a conflict of interest, you get what's called an RAS flip, reticular activation flip. And if this is the whole picture of who you are, there's good things in where you are, in who you are, maybe there's some bad things or shortcomings in who you are. They have this RAS flip, and they go from focusing overly on the good parts about you to focusing on the negative parts. And that is one of the saddest aspects of human nature. And what we ultimately have to do is we have to find a way to rise above that and say, no, I'm gonna still love humanity. And the first way that I still, and I'd like to hear your take on this, but the first way that I still love humanity is every time that, and this is probably, the big key that I've used, every single time that I see somebody doing something negative, whether that's engaging in tribalism, whether that's engaging in a pendulum, whether that's blowing off negative energy and triangulating people, whether that's having an RAS flip because they feel like they're not benefiting from something anymore, I ask myself, where is my version of that? Where am I in my life doing that, even if it's way less? Where is my version? And in seeing that other people do that and using that as a mirror on myself, I can find forgiveness because I understand that human beings, we're a work in progress. Our existence on this planet is a work in progress. We're trying. People are trying their best. People are going off of the information and paradigms that they have. And in finding forgiveness for myself, I can find forgiveness for other people and recognize that ultimately, what do we want the world to look like? Do we want this continual pendulum going back and forth? Or do we want to stop the pendulum and sometimes say, you know what? It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And maybe there's sometimes someone's being so bad that you do have to draw some kind of boundary, and there's going to be cases of that. We can't make a fairy tale universe. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that aspect of their humanity as a part of our own humanity and do what we can to stop that pendulum from going back and forth. One thing that I do really resonate with is what Eckhart Tolle says, where he says, when he feels that negative energy going into him, he says, can I be the space for this? Can I be the space for this? And the big thing that I try to recognize is that, look, there's going to be periods in my life where I have to draw a boundary. There's going to be periods where if somebody's coming at you, you have to, stop. And there's also healthy competition, like in entrepreneurship, where that competition can fuel a better product. And that's a degree of healthy competition. That's where it's healthy and can benefit people. And I don't have an overall worldview for you on that. But what I do know is that I truly do believe that Eckhart Tolle idea, and can I be the space for this? Can I recognize that, I don't know if I want to call it a curse, but that heaviness that we all inherit as being a part of this reality here, that this dimension that we seem to be in. I mean, and we could really speculate on that. And then what I'd say, and this is what I ultimately try to remind myself, is that, there's a quote from the Bible. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like, forgive them, Lord, for they do not know that which they do. I think the meaning of that is that your enemy is not the other person, but your opponent is the energy that has infected that person, maybe to such a degree that energy is running them, and that energy can also attack you and your thoughts and change your behavior. And rather than seeing the other person at the surface and viewing that as the opponent, we've got to come together and say it's that energy that's the opponent. And we have to learn techniques, whether that's release work. Julian talks a lot about that. Whether it's laughter, you'll see me and Luke cracking a lot of jokes. Some people might sage the room, put a bunch of sage in it, a crystalline. I mean, whatever works for you, it doesn't matter. But you want to find some kind of way, whether it's a sauna and just sweating out that negative energy, whether it's some kind of outlet, whether it's having fun, pragmatic stuff, going to stand-up comedy. But you want to take it where, can I be the space for this? And let yourself get impacted. In certain cases where you need a boundary or to kind of, hey, that kind of thing, fair enough. But from there, overall, I would ask you this. When you're at the end of your life, when you know that this is it, that you're leaving this reality, this dimension, this life, you're going to ask yourself, was your life a net negative or a net positive? Because whatever it is that you were a conduit for, human beings are conduits for energy, positive, negative energy. You're going to have been a conduit for that negative energy. And was your existence on this earth a net positive or a net negative? Whenever I personally would have a boundary or have to, hey, like that, I'm asking myself, by drawing that boundary, is that going to allow me to be better, to make the world better? That is my decision. That's my decision. Not, am I going to draw a boundary because it's me against them in some strange way? No. What I'm asking myself is this going to make the world better? That's my North Star. And I would ask you, whatever it is, you have to make your own decision to find your own North Star of what will make it where you're at the end of your life. Did your life represent positivity, negativity, hatred, or love? Lastly, and I'll end with this, there was one time, it was when I found out that the mother of my kids had just got pregnant. It was an unplanned pregnancy. And man, was that a really intense period of my life. And right around that first week, I was having this beautiful day with all of my friends. We're in Phoenix, a beautiful day. And a couple things business-wise went wrong, and I complained that whole day. And as my friend was taking a hard right turn, I looked up, and a pickup truck was coming towards me and went, "Arr!" And I realized this is it, and it smashed me, bashed right into me. And I woke up bleeding, unconscious, and unable to breathe. Now, I lived from that. I was in bed a couple months after, but I lived from that. But I remember in that moment believing, just due to not being able to breathe and bleeding and unable to move, wrongly believing that I was gonna die. And when I believed I was gonna die, all that I could think of at that moment was the only truth of my life is the love that I left behind, the legacy that I left behind, the contribution that I left behind, and the net positivity that my life represented, and that every single other thing was a lie. Everything was a lie. It's all a lie except leaving behind that positivity. And when you see groups of people attacking each other or going after each other, they are in a trance, they are seeing a lie, and to wake up means to see the bigger picture of our existence, the fragility and unlikelihood of life, treasuring life, not seeing yourself as man, woman, not seeing yourself as an isolated island always being impinged upon, but by seeing that which we all share and that togetherness and making a decision of what your life is going to represent. So this is a video that we wanted to go deep. We wanted to really strike a chord with you about love and about positivity, about recognizing who we are and rising above that, about still finding the way to love other people despite what you're going to see. Not having to make a fairy tale, not see it and make yourself crazy, but about seeing it and loving other people anyway. We had that moment on the bench earlier this week when talking about one of the great privileges of life is to understand human nature and to forgive and love people in spite of it. We hope that we handle this subject respectfully. If there's anything that we got wrong or misinterpreted in any way, we apologize. But we wanted to create something really powerful for you that you'll take with you and remember to change your behavior and to change your perspective and ultimately to change the direction of your life. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We'll be back with much more, and we'll see you soon. Peace.